Most people know her name from a prize. Fewer know the smell of her childhood room, sawdust, chalk dust, and cold air pressing through thin window glass in Warsaw. Picture a small apartment on Freda Street in the Praga district of Warsaw, in the Kingdom of Poland, which, in 1867, was not Poland at all. It was Russian territory. The street signs were in Russian. The lessons in school were conducted in Russian. Even the language of her birth, Polish, had to be spoken carefully, quietly, and in the right rooms. Into this particular world, on the 7th of November 1867, came Maria Sklodowska, the youngest of 5 children, the daughter of a schoolteacher father and a mother who ran a small boarding house to keep the family alive. Her father, Władysław Sklodowski, taught mathematics and physics. He kept scientific instruments on a glass shelf in the apartment: a barometer, a gold leaf electroscope, a collection of mineral samples. Maria would stand in front of that shelf as a small child and press her forehead against the glass. She did not touch. She watched. Her mother, Bronisława, had been the director of a prestigious girls' school in Warsaw before illness, tuberculosis, forced her to retire from public life. Maria grew up watching her mother wear gloves in the house, not for warmth, but to protect the children from infection. There was love in that house, and there was distance too. The kind of distance that illness builds between a mother and the children she adores but cannot fully hold. She was an exceptional student from the beginning. Her memory was noted by teachers and relatives alike. She could repeat long passages of text after a single reading. She read Polish literature in secret, stuffed into coat pockets, memorized before the pages were confiscated. She finished her secondary education in 1883 at the top of her class, earning a gold medal. But after that, the door closed. The University of Warsaw did not accept women. It was simply not for her. She was 17 years old, gold medal in hand, and officially out of options. Except that she and her older sister had a plan, and it was going to require one of them to disappear first. There was an institution in Warsaw known, quietly, as the Flying University, or the Floating University. It had no building. It had no official existence at all. It moved from private apartment to private apartment, in week after week, to avoid detection by Russian authorities. Women gathered in living rooms and back parlors to study mathematics, natural sciences, anatomy, and sociology. The curtains were drawn. The conversations were hushed. Maria attended for 2 years, but illegal lectures in borrowed rooms were not a degree. Both Maria and her older sister Bronisława understood that. Bronia, as she was called, wanted to study medicine in Paris. Maria wanted to study science. The University of Paris, the Sorbonne, accepted women. It was, however, very far away, and the cost was entirely beyond the family's means. So the 2 sisters made an agreement. Maria would work as a governess and send a portion of her wages to Paris to support Bronia's medical studies. Once Bronia qualified and established herself, she would return the support, and Maria would go. It was a reasonable plan, and a demanding one. Maria was 18. She took a position with a family called Zarowski in the countryside outside Warsaw, the village of Szczuki. She lived in their home, ate at their table, and taught their children reading, French, and arithmetic. She also taught the local peasant children, secretly, in Polish, which was illegal under Russian law. She did it anyway. Think about what it meant to spend your most intellectually hungry years teaching other people's children in a cold estate house, watching the science equipment you couldn't touch, writing letters to a sister in a city you were financing but couldn't yet enter. The restraint alone is remarkable. She lived in Szczuki for nearly 3 years. The house was large but drafty. In her letters, she described the cold of the countryside winter, the long evenings, the boredom that settled over her like a second coat. She read voraciously. Books on physics and mathematics borrowed, requested, sent from Warsaw. She wrote to her father regularly, precise and affectionate letters that show a woman working hard to stay mentally alive in an environment that could easily have swallowed her whole. There was also a brief, painful romantic entanglement with Kazimierz Zurawski, the eldest son of the family she worked for. They intended to marry. His parents refused to allow their son to wed a penniless governess. He acquiesced to their refusal. Maria left the position. She found another governess post, closer to Warsaw, and continued saving. It is a detail often omitted from the polished biography, and it matters. Because the woman who arrived in Paris in 1891 had already survived a particular kind of private grief alongside the public constraint. She arrived in the French capital in November 1891. She was 23 years old. She had a small amount of money, a borrowed folding chair, and an enrollment form for the Faculty of Sciences at the Sorbonne, the first of very few women to hold one. Her first apartment in Paris was in the Latin Quarter, on the Rue Flatte, a single room at the top of a 6th-floor building. There was no heat source beyond a small coal stove, and there was frequently no coal. On the coldest nights, she slept with all of her clothing piled on top of the bed and still woke with water frozen in the wash basin. She described this matter-of-factly in her autobiography, written decades later, "No self-pity, in just observation." The cold was a fact. The work was the point. She cooked minimally. Chocolate, bread, chocolate again, sometimes eggs. She fainted once from hunger in a lecture hall, a detail confirmed by her sister Branya, who by this point had qualified as a doctor and was living in Paris with her physician husband. Branya found Maria too thin, too pale, and brought her home for weeks of regular meals and sleep before letting her return to her room and her books. At the Sorbonne, she studied physics with a focus she described as almost physical, a sensation of pressing herself toward the material, toward understanding. She learned to navigate the social landscape of the university with care. Most of her professors were men. Most of her classmates were men. She was noticed, not always kindly, as an anomaly. The records from this period show her as extremely reserved in public and extremely precise in written work. She passed her physics degree in 1893, first in her class. She passed her mathematics degree the following year, second in her class. It was in Paris that she met Marie Curie in the spring of 1894. He was 35 and already a respected physicist, the discoverer, with his brother Jacques, of piezoelectricity. He had also been, for reasons that said something about the quiet stubbornness of his character, working without a proper laboratory for years. Someone introduced them at a dinner. Pierre was immediately struck, not only by her, but by the quality of her thinking. He offered her workspace in his laboratory. She was cautious. She had not come to Paris to marry. There is something quietly striking about the fact that Marie Curie, who would later become the most decorated scientist of her era, spent her first years in Paris nearly starving in a freezing room, paying for it all herself, asking no one for anything. The mythology of genius tends to erase the material conditions. The cold was real. Pierre proposed. She declined initially and returned to Warsaw for the summer. She had tentatively planned to remain in Poland and work there, perhaps as a teacher. But the positions she sought were not available to women. The doors in Warsaw, as in her childhood, were closed. Pierre wrote to her, letters that were both ardent and intellectually precise, which was probably the only kind that could have reached her. She returned to Paris. They married on July 26, 1895, in a simple civil ceremony. She wore a dark blue dress, practical, suitable for the laboratory. She would wear it for years afterward. No religious ceremony, no reception. They rode out of the city on bicycles they had bought with wedding gift money and spent their honeymoon cycling through rural France. What came next was not the story of a scientist and his assistant. It was something the world had no framework for yet. Two scientists, together, hunting something invisible inside matter itself. In 1896, a French physicist named Henri Becquerel discovered that uranium salts emitted a kind of ray, without any external energy source, without light, without heat, without any cause that existing physics could explain. The phenomenon was real, documented, and almost completely ignored by the scientific community. Nearly everyone moved on. Marie Curie did not. For her doctoral research, she was one of the first women in Europe to pursue a scientific doctorate. She chose to investigate Becquerel's uranium rays. She used a technique developed by Pierre and Jacques Curie years earlier, measuring the ionization of air caused by the rays using an electrometer and a piezoelectric crystal to detect minute electric currents. The apparatus was sensitive. The measurements were meticulous. What she found, early in 1898, was that the intensity of the radiation was directly proportional to the amount of uranium in a sample, and nothing else. Not its chemical state, not its temperature, not whether it had been dissolved, powdered, or left whole. The radiation came from the atom itself. She coined the word radioactivity. It was her term, her concept, her framework. And then she noticed something else. In two minerals, pitchblende, a uranium ore, and chalcolite, a uranium copper phosphate, were far more radioactive than pure uranium alone. Far more. The only explanation was that these minerals contained one or more undiscovered elements, even more radioactive than uranium itself. Pierre set aside his own research and joined her. Together they worked in a converted shed behind the School of Physics, a former dissecting room, leaking in rain, overheated in summer, unventilated, with a dirt floor and wooden tables that absorbed chemical spills. They processed enormous quantities of pitchblende, ordered from the mines of Bohemia. Tons of ore, reduced by acid, filtered, evaporated, crystallized, separated. Over and over. The work was physically brutal, stirring boiling acid solutions with an iron rod in clouds of vapor, hours each day, when their hands were perpetually stained and cracked. Marie described the shed as a cross between a stable and a cellar. In July 1898, they announced the discovery of the first new element, polonium, named for Marie's occupied homeland. In December 1898, they announced radium. Pure radium was still years away. The isolation of 1 gram of radium chloride would require processing over 1 ton of pitchblende and take until 1902. But the discovery was real. In the shed at night, the purified compounds glowed, a faint blue luminescence in the darkness. Marie wrote that she found it beautiful. She kept samples on her bedside table. Neither of them knew what the radiation was doing to their bodies. Pierre's hands were raw and scarred. Marie's fingers were cracked and had lost sensation at the tips. Both suffered from chronic fatigue, and both attributed it to overwork. The danger was invisible, unfamiliar, unnamed. Their laboratory notebooks from this period are still radioactive today, kept in lead-lined boxes at the Bibliothèque Nationale de France. Anyone who wishes to read them must sign a waiver. The notebooks glow faintly in their boxes, a century later. They handled those pages every day, not knowing. There is something about that particular detail that is very hard to set aside once you know it. In 1903, Marie and Pierre Curie shared the Nobel Prize in Physics with Henri Becquerel. Marie Curie was the first woman to receive a Nobel Prize. She was also, very nearly, not included. The initial nomination from the French Academy of Sciences named only Pierre and Becquerel. It was Pierre who insisted, in correspondence with the Nobel Committee, and that his wife be credited equally. She was. The prize was awarded in December. Marie was too ill to travel to Stockholm for the ceremony. She collected it the following year. In April 1906, Pierre Curie was struck and killed by a horse-drawn wagon on the Rue Dauphine in Paris. He had been distracted or unwell. His coordination had been failing for months, likely a consequence of radiation exposure. He was 46. Marie was 38, widowed, with 2 daughters, and the most famous scientist in the world. What she did next was not what anyone expected. After Pierre's death, the University of Paris offered Marie his professorship. She accepted. On November 5th, 1906, she walked into the amphitheater of the Sorbonne and delivered her first lecture, beginning exactly where Pierre had stopped his last one, with the same sentence, or was on the same topic, in the same tone. The hall was packed. Students had arrived at dawn to claim seats. Journalists stood at the back. She looked at the room, opened her notes, and began. No preamble, no acknowledgement of the occasion, just the physics. She became the first female professor at the Sorbonne. She was never elected to the French Academy of Sciences. That institution would not admit a woman for another 60 years. When she was nominated, in 1911, the vote was taken and she lost by 2 ballots amid a press campaign that questioned her nationality, her morality, and her right to the laboratory she had built with her own hands. The same year, she received her second Nobel Prize, this time in chemistry, for the isolation of pure radium and polonium. She remains the only person in history to have won Nobel Prizes in 2 different scientific disciplines. There were 2 daughters, Irene, born in 1897, and Eve, born in 1904. Irene would go on to win a Nobel Prize in chemistry herself in 1935, alongside her husband Frédéric Joliot, making the Curie family the most decorated in Nobel history. Eve became a journalist and wrote the definitive biography of her mother. Marie raised both daughters largely alone, with help from her father-in-law Eugène Curie, who moved into the family home after Pierre died and remained there until his own death. During the First World War, Marie Curie developed the first mobile X-ray units, vehicles she called petites curies, small curies, that could be driven directly to field hospitals. She trained herself and her daughter Irene, then 17, to operate the equipment and read the radiographs. Together they drove to the front. The units are estimated to have assisted in over 1 million examinations of wounded soldiers. Marie raised the funding herself, sourced the vehicles, lobbied the military, and trained the nurses. She did all of this because she thought it was useful and she could do it. She died on July 4, 1934, at a sanatorium in Passy, in the French Alps. The cause was aplastic anemia, bone marrow failure almost certainly caused by decades of radiation exposure. She was 66. Her body was buried beside Pierre's in Sceaux. In 1995, at the initiative of the French government, both were reinterred in the Pantheon in Paris, the national mausoleum reserved for France's greatest figures. Marie Curie was the first woman to enter the Pantheon on her own merit. Not as a king's wife, not as a symbol, as a scientist. Her personal items, her furniture, her clothing, her papers, many are still radioactive. The blue dress she wore for years in the laboratory, the notebooks she carried, the cookbooks in her kitchen. Radiation has a half-life. Some of it will still be measurable for 1,500 years. What is worth sitting with, across all of this, is the sheer accumulation of barriers she moved through. Barred from universities in her home country, working in secret, sending her wages to a sister, surviving on bread and cold water in a Paris garret, processing tons of ore in a leaking shed, having her Nobel nomination withheld, losing a husband, being excluded from every institution she had helped build. She did not work around these obstacles by pretending they did not exist. She simply continued working. And what connects her to every woman before her who studied in secret, or taught in secret, or worked without credit, or passed her discoveries through a husband's name, is not just the barriers, but the refusal. The refusal to accept that the closed door was the final answer. She was never given what was already hers. She built it instead, again and again and again, in sheds and wardrobes and borrowed rooms, until the world ran out of ways to say no. If this story moves something in you, leave a comment below. Tell us which woman, which era, or which hidden corner of history you'd like us to reconstruct next. Every story that has been forgotten is waiting to be found again.